Our grandmothers literally used to use rollers overnight to curl their hair, and then we started using curling irons, and now we're bringing back heatless curls. I think we're learning. Hey besties, and welcome back to Sustainability Sundays, where every Sunday I give you tips to live your life a little bit more sustainably without making any major changes or breaking the bank. Today, I gotta deliver a really difficult message to y'all. Our grandparents were right. Not about everything. Like, don't get me wrong. A lot of that generation has some very racist and sexist opinions. I don't mean they were right about that. But a lot of those weird things that they did, they weren't really that weird. They were being more sustainable. Our grandparents grew up in the Depression era. They learned how to save money, but a lot of that was by being more sustainable. Obviously, I can only speak from my experience, what my grandparents were like, what my friends' grandparents were like. I've noticed that a lot of grandparents had gardens. That was a huge thing back in the Depression era. Food was not as easy to get, so people grew their own food and herbs. I know, I would always be like, oh, like grandma, why are you out gardening all the time? Like, have a life, do something else. Like, why is grandma so obsessed with her garden? It's better for the planet and for the wallet. If you can grow your own food, it will always be the most sustainable option. Again, I'm not in a situation where I can, but if you can, the best idea. Grandma, grandpa, why are you always reading? Why do you never watch TV? Reading is way more sustainable. I know that sounds dumb. I've already gone on my spiel about books versus ebooks and all that. I have a whole video on physical media versus sustainability, but there's no arguing with the fact that reading instead of watching TV uses less electricity, which is more sustainable. And it takes longer to get through a book than it does to get through a TV show or movie. So that one piece of media gives you much longer enjoyment. That shirt that your grandparents would wear that would, you know, have different patches sewn all over it because it was ripped. Yeah, no, that's called sustainability. That's patching up your own clothes, fixing your own clothes. That's way more sustainable than getting rid of your clothes and buying new. On that note, the random jars of buttons that you would find at your grandparents' houses. Even my mom had random jars of buttons. That's more sustainable because if something goes wrong with your clothes, boom, you have a replacement button. I will believe until the end of time that sewing is one of the most valuable skills you can have. I would love to be able to sew. My grandfather always carried around handkerchiefs. He always had a handkerchief in his pocket, which I know nowadays with the way that society is, we think that's gross. But that was way more sustainable than just pulling out tissues. Having a travel pack of tissues versus having one handkerchief that you can toss in the washing machine. Our grandparents' generation also wasn't so hyper fixated on germs and hygiene. I know that that's a whole different ball game that we can get into, but they didn't pull out hand sanitizer anytime they want to touch anything in public. Tell me, how sustainable is buying all those little bottles of hand sanitizer? Not very sustainable. Our grandparents would cook all their own meals. They hated going out to restaurants. They would never order pizza for delivery, and that's way more sustainable. Genuinely, it is significantly more sustainable to cook your own food than to get takeout. Restaurants is still debatable. I believe that is a point of contention. This is about not altering your lifestyle. So like if you want to go out to restaurants, by all means, but is it as sustainable as cooking at home is? I don't think so. Our grandparents weren't buying new technology all the time, and they certainly weren't getting new cleaning technology all the time. One of my dream products is getting that wet dry vacuum mop. That didn't exist back then. Our grandparents would use classic mops. Vacuums sometimes, not even always for vacuums, because back in the Depression era, you couldn't use that kind of electricity. They would use pure elbow grease when it came to cleaning, which not everybody can do that nowadays. Not everyone could do that then, but people were forced to power through it. Nowadays, people can acknowledge when they're not able to do it. For example, I can't bend much. I have POTS, it affects my heart rate. I can't bend over much. I can't have my arms above my head for too long. There's certain things I can't do. If it was my grandparents and one of them had that issue, they wouldn't let that stop them because that was a completely different time. It couldn't stop them. And on that note, they weren't out buying non-toxic cleaning chemicals, which don't get me wrong, I'm all for the non-toxic cleaning chemicals, but they would use vinegar and lemon juice and sometimes bleach. They would use things they already had, which is what I like to do. I like to use what I have. I like to be more sustainable in that sense. That is certainly way more sustainable than, as I've said in my cleaning videos, than buying one cleaner for glass, one cleaner for the floors, one cleaner for the bathroom. You can buy so many different cleaners when vinegar will do 98% of it. During Depression era, people didn't eat as much meat. I'm a vegan, so I can't really speak on that, but I do encourage that as a vegan, but I'm not gonna be pushy. Like I said, this is about being more sustainable without hugely changing your lifestyle. If you can cut meat out of 1 or 2 meals a week, that is hugely more sustainable. I'm not gonna go on my whole spiel about what meat does to the planet and all of that. Just know that cutting out meat is more sustainable. When I would open my grandparents' fridge, you didn't see storage containers. Sometimes there'd be some Tupperware, on occasion. 90% of the time, it would be country crock butter containers filled with different things. Genuinely, that's what my grandfather's fridge was. That's what my dad's fridge was too, for that matter. It was containers from things that you bought pre-made that was just being repurposed. Everyone knows those butter cookie tins that ended up having sewing supplies in them, because that's what our grandparents did. And that's being more sustainable. Think back to the furniture that your grandparents had when you were growing up. It was the same thing from when you were born until you were an adult, right? Let me guess. That was also the same furniture from when your parents were growing up, right? Our grandparents didn't replace things because they wanted to redecorate. I'm very guilty of this right now. I'm not replacing things like furniture because I want to redecorate, but I'm redecorating. I'm changing things up a lot. Our grandparents didn't. Depression era, you couldn't. You couldn't afford to, and things were built better then. That's why now I will highly encourage, if you do need furniture, please try to buy it secondhand, because anything from back then is built way better than anything that you can buy now new. The quality just isn't there anymore. Our grandparents thrifted and collected hand-me-downs to pass on. But most importantly, in my opinion, most important for sustainability, our grandparents had relationships with their neighbors. When I was a little kid, my across the street neighbors were around the same age as my grandparents. They welcomed us into the neighborhood with open arms when we moved there. They had raspberry bushes when I was growing up, and raspberries are my favorite fruit, by the way. Every year, when the raspberries were growing on the bush, they would keep bringing us over more and more packages of raspberries because, hey, Maya loves these, we have these. It's a neighborly relationship. Every year on Christmas, I would bring those neighbors cookies. There's something about having that kind of relationship where it becomes more sustainable. Again, because things like they were growing food that they would give us, we would give them snacks. I had a neighbor that I'm still very close with that we had an issue in our apartment that he came over to fix. Neighbors help each other when you have a good relationship with them. I have friends that have gotten furniture from their parents' neighbors. I know plenty of people that their neighbors have helped them with so much. Speaking of my neighbor fixing an issue in our apartment, in the Depression era, our grandparents learned how to do everything for themselves. I think that you've probably heard the expression, jack of all trades. And normally it's said sarcastically, condescendingly, because they say, oh, jack of all trades, master of none. As in someone that knows a little bit about everything, but isn't particularly good at anything. I've only really heard it used condescendingly towards people. But at the end of the day, that's how it should be. That's the best way. Our grandparents know a little bit about everything. How to cook, how to clean, how to fix home issues when they came up, how to fix car issues when they came up. I like to say pretty good at cooking. Vegan foods, obviously. I don't trust myself to cook meat. I haven't eaten meat in so long. I don't trust it to be safe. I love to clean. I love it. Would I say I'm the best at it? Not necessarily, but I enjoy it. I don't know how to patch a hole in the wall or ceiling though. That's what my neighbor came over to help me with. I know a bit about cars. I might not drive, but my dad, when I was growing up, was a mechanic. I know how to check a car's oil. I know how to jump a car. When we were teenagers and everyone was getting their licenses, I taught all my friends how to pump their own gas. Nowadays, if something goes wrong, you can Google it. That's a simple solution, is to Google whatever goes wrong. Become a jack of all trades around your house. Because do you know how much money calling a repairman costs? Again, something as simple as patching a hole, my neighbor did it for free. If we called a repairman, probably hundreds if not thousands of dollars. Our grandparents didn't call professionals to help them with anything. Which ties into how many people's grandfathers tried to do all the landscaping, all the yard work until they were far too old to be doing any manual labor. Everybody's, right? Because that's what it comes down to. Our grandparents wanted to be a jack of all trades. They wanted to know how to do everything. Our grandparents would bulk cook meals and freeze them in their second freezer because most grandparents had a second freezer for some reason. Be it garage, basement, most grandparents had a second freezer. If your grandparent took you out for your birthday It wasn't like they were having a party for you. It wasn't like they went out and got you a store-bought cake. They would bring you to their house, have a cake that they made, and you just be hanging out with your grandparents. Maybe your cousins would be over. Our grandparents didn't believe in bringing kids to Chuck E. Cheese and spending all that money just for a kid to run around for half an hour and be broke, and spending all that money on food there and buying a store-bought cake when it's way more sustainable, less electricity use. Just bring the kids to the grandparents' house. Let the kid hang out with their cousins. Make a cake from scratch. It's probably way better tasting than anything that you would get at the store. There's a reason that so many people feel nostalgic about certain smells, being like, oh, this reminds me of grandma's house. Grandparents would build memories with their grandkids by cooking with them or baking with them or actually spending time with them, not buying something or doing something that'll be a waste at the end. It was making core memories, not just wasting time and money and resources. This might just be a personal one, but my grandfather collected antiques and then sold them at flea markets. I like to think that's where my love of flea markets and yard sales came from. As far back as my memories go, I don't remember my grandfather ever buying anything new. It was always secondhand. It was always flea markets or yard sales. I can't speak to my grandmother because I was 2 when she passed, so I don't remember anything about her. All of my friends' grandmothers though, with the exception of one, all of my friends' grandmothers were very much homesteader styles. They were either stay-at-home moms, or they were nurses, or they were something along those lines, where as they aged, all that they wanted was to take care of the home, to be a homesteader, to grow their own food, to do all the cooking, to have the kitchen be the heart of the family. And that is significantly more sustainable than anything our generation's doing. Granted, they had a completely different economy and they could do completely different things. But the ones that were around during the Depression, they learned things the hard way. They walked places because they couldn't replace the tires on their cars because there wasn't rubber. That was a thing. I read the American Girl books. I know what time was like back then. According to American Girl. It was a huge deal if a kid got a bike. It wasn't to be expected for a kid to have like 8 bikes. It was a huge deal. You were rich if a kid got a bike back then. Stuffed animals were handmade. You weren't going to Build-A-Bear to make a new stuffed animal every month. Our grandparents understood what it was like to not be wasteful. I'm not saying our generation is wasteful, so much as society as a whole is a lot more wasteful now than it was then. You know, our grandparents probably had the exact same cookware our entire lives and our parents' entire lives. I'll never forget my aunt's crock pot that she used to have, that every now and then I see the crock pot at thrift stores and I'm like, that's one that my aunt had. And the response is always, oh, like, that's super old. And I'm like, yeah, it was a trooper. But it's so distinctive in my brain that when I see it, I'm like, oh, that's the one my aunt had. Because these are the core memories that grandparents built. Again, she's my aunt, not my grandmother, but family dynamics are weird, okay? Our grandparents wouldn't necessarily turn on the heat during the winter. They would either have a wood-burning stove, or they would just turn on the normal stove and open it so the heat could just seep out. And during the summer, we weren't turning on the AC when we were at our grandparents' houses. We were given a fan and maybe a spray bottle with water to cool off. Because they knew what it was like to not have AC. They knew what it was like to not be able to afford it. Our grandparents didn't get new things. They didn't upgrade things. They were used to going without, because those that were around for the Depression didn't have an opportunity to have anything. So I look around my apartment and I see my cat's automatic electric watering dish. I see my air conditioner. I see my Keurig and my Nespresso sitting next to each other. My grandfather would have a heart attack seeing all this. He had his classic coffee maker that had a reusable filter that made a whole pot of coffee at once. That, to me, as someone that doesn't drink that much coffee, I don't think that that's as sustainable, because I would just be getting rid of half that coffee. But to him, having a single serve coffee maker like this would blow his mind. Well, actually no, he was alive in the time of Keurigs, but you know what I'm saying. So many of the things that we have, our grandparents would be shocked by. He would not know what to do with himself when he would hear the words air fryer. I have a trash barrel that you wave your hand over and it opens. That would be considered absolutely insane to his generation. These things that we consider normal and second nature and just part of life are things that our grandparents would be shaking their head at and telling us you're crazy. And sometimes I think that we need to take more lessons from them, from the things that we made fun of them for. Our grandmothers that used the same lipstick as long back as we can remember. They didn't have a drawer full of makeup. They had one lipstick they wore every single day. And then when that ran out, they bought a new one of the exact same shade. Our grandparents knew what they were doing. They didn't necessarily know that they were saving the planet and being sustainable, but they knew that when they were young, this was ingrained in them because their family didn't have the money. The Depression was a real thing. And so much that stuck with so many of them. My grandfather didn't use credit cards. He would only use cash to pay for things, which honestly, I think is probably a little beneficial. Don't get me wrong, I'll never carry cash because I lose everything and I can't trust myself to lose cash. But I do genuinely think that it's better for our society now to go back to a lot of what people did during the Great Depression. It'll help save our planet a little bit more. So I leave you with this thought. What did your grandparents do that you used to think was so embarrassing or so strange or so just out of pocket and I don't know why they do that? Then now you can look back and say, huh, I guess that maybe that was a sustainable change. Maybe that was something they learned in the Depression that was more sustainable. Let me know in the comments what that was, because I would love to know what other people's grandparents did. I look back now and I can't believe that I was ever embarrassed that my grandfather would carry around a handkerchief. But I was like 10 and anything was embarrassing at that age. Let me know what sustainability hacks that your grandparents had that you're going to start adopting or that you already have adopted. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday and then alternating Mondays and Fridays. Every Sunday is Sustainability Sunday. So if you like hearing about sustainability, come back here next Sunday. When you do subscribe, make sure you hit the bell. Otherwise, YouTube will never tell you when I post new videos. It's a little bit broken like that. I love you all and I will see you in my next video. Bye.
I don't know, but I've been told the world outside is oh so cold. So cold.